Ah, hello, dear friends. Thank you for your patience with all the technical difficulties. Um, my heart is in my throat. Thank you so much, Gabe. So, dear friends, thank you for your patience this evening. I need to offer a little self-compassion to myself, and thanks to Gabe for um, walking me through this. So metta practice is essentially offering friendliness to ourselves and to others. Um, the foundation of loving kindness is the idea of no ill will. And it's the idea that all beings should be free from greed, hatred, delusion. It's a very beneficial wish. Um, Venerable Analio talks about metta as benevolence, radiating kindness in all directions, and wishing for other beings to flourish. So, the metta practice I want to share with you tonight is a practice that I've used frequently. It's a practice that was developed in response to the tragedy of 9/11. And it's a practice that I think is particularly appropriate for this time. So let's just, I need a minute just to kind of collect myself. So let's just all sit and breathe and come back to our intention. And just connecting with our basic goodness here and our wish for flourishing for ourselves and others. So, the practice I'm going to share with you this evening is a practice that, as I said, was developed in New York by New York Insight after the tragedy of 9/11. And it's a practice that um, really was a response to the idea of uncertainty, vulnerability, um, and the fear and confusion. Uh, Kind of 9/11 was the end of the world as we knew it, at least here in the United States. And sometimes we think about our lives as pre 9/11 and post 9/11. And the way this was practiced initially was that metta was offered to people in the towers, their families and friends, the first responders, all the people in New York City, their families and friends, um, people around the world who were harmed by these events. And there's iteration after iteration after iteration. And finally, there was an iteration that was for those responsible for these events and then for their families and friends. And this is a metta practice that I've shared with persons at the correctional facility where up until we were all staying at home, I would visit regularly and offer this practice. So my plan for tonight was that we would do this practice together, and then I wanted to talk about what each of the phrases that we're going to use can mean when we really tease them out. So let's begin. And metta practice, um, the suggestion often is to choose a posture that's kind to yourself, that is relaxed, that enables you to feel that you're actually being kind to your body. So find a position. And I know a lot of people like to do metta practice lying down. So you can experiment with what seems to be uh, the most supportive for you. And just come into yourself and into the place you are right now, taking a few easy breaths, feeling yourself grounded, feeling yourself safe. And we're going to begin by offering this loving kindness to ourselves. May I be well, safe, and peaceful. May I be well, safe, peaceful. May I be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May I be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May I find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May I find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May I cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May I cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May I live in peace and harmony with all beings. May I live in peace and harmony with all beings. May my family and my friends be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. May all healthcare workers and first responders be well, safe, peaceful. May all healthcare workers and first responders be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. May all the families and all the friends of healthcare workers and first responders be well, safe, peaceful. May those families and friends be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May those families and friends find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May those families and friends cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. May all essential service workers, cashiers, delivery people, postal carriers, bus drivers, journalists, and all other essential service workers be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. And may their families and friends be well, safe, peaceful. May their families and friends be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May their families and friends find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May their families and friends cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May their family and friends live in peace and harmony with all beings. May all those persons who have lost their jobs or their businesses be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. May persons who are incarcerated or in detention during this time be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. And may their families and friends be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. And may all our elected and appointed officials be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, and by ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. And may their families and friends also be well, safe, peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. And may everyone everywhere affected by COVID-19 in any place be well, safe, peaceful. May anyone who's affected be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. And may they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. And now bring into your heart and mind whatever category of persons you would like to remember, that you would like to offer these good wishes for flourishing, for reconciliation. Just hold that category of persons in your heart and in your mind. May they be well, be safe, be peaceful. May they be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. May they find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May they cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May they live in peace and harmony with all beings. May we all, every one of us, be well, safe, peaceful. May we all be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. And may we all find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. And may we all cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May we all live in peace and harmony with all beings and recognize that we are all so deeply, so intimately connected. And let's just sit for a minute. And thank you all for your practice. And thank you for your patience in my uh, awkward uh, emergence into live streaming. Um, so, what I'd like to do this evening is to go through those phrases with you and unpack them, talk about their implications. And what is it when we offer these aspirations, um, our heartfelt um, good wishes um, to another? What is it when we wish someone to be well? And for me, that really uh, means having a kind of balance in body, balance in mind, that a well person is a person who is flourishing. And it doesn't always mean a person who is in great physical health. I've known some people who have had really extremely challenging physical situations, and sometimes some just extremely distressing circumstances. But they have a kind of wellness to them, that they are um, spiritually grounded. Sometimes might be a way of saying it, that there is a kind of essential balance to them, um, and a kind of acceptance of how things are with them right now. So when I think about wellness, I think about that sort of inner strength, maybe inner resilience. And when I think about what it means to be safe, I reflect that the most essential fact of our lives is that when we were born, someone cared enough to keep us alive. I mean, we are only here because someone or more than one person cared about us. And I think this is such an important thing to remember, that we are essentially a caring species. And we live with impermanence and uncertainty, but it is that caring capacity that is essential to our sense of safety. It's about connecting with our own capacity to care and to be cared for, the goodwill of others. I heard Mingyur Rinpoche once give a teaching, and he was saying that when a person is dying, sometimes the hardest thing is for what keeps them tethered is their concern about their families and their friends. And he said it's a good idea to encourage the person who is dying to believe that there are many compassionate beings in this world, and that the dying person can sort of hand over the family and the friends, trusting in the many compassionate beings in the world who will care. And I think this is just such a beautiful teaching, that our sense of safety is really grounded in our own capacity to care, and to trust that there are others who will care for us, care with us. It's I believe that our sense of safety is connected to our belief in compassion, to our experience of compassion. And when we wish for ourselves and others to be peaceful, it's non-agitation, it's calm in turbulence, it's non-harming for ourselves and others. To be full of peace is to be non-harming toward ourselves and non-harming toward others. So that's the first of these aspirations in this practice. The second is the aspiration to be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, and by ill will. And ill will is, wanting another person to suffer for the sake of suffering, wanting harm for another. And that's very, very different than wanting justice to prevail, wanting sort of wanting an appropriate redress of injustice. But it's that wanting to harm someone for the sake of their being harmed is ill will. So we want to be free from the suffering caused by our own mental states and the way we act them out. And, fear and anger and ill will can arise in us. And if we just have the mindfulness to recognize it and let it move through, then we are okay, it's something that arises, passes through, and we're just mindful of it. We let it pass through our awareness, but it's the clinging to these states and acting on them that's harmful and that causes suffering. And I've told this story before about Jill Bolte Taylor, who was the Harvard researcher who suffered a really, and she was a brain researcher, and she suffered a really serious aneurysm when she was about 35. She was on the treadmill in the morning at her home and had this terrific aneurysm and spent years in therapy. She lost her ability to speak, to walk, and just had many, many years in rehab before she was able to continue on with her professional life. And she said that even though she was truly brain damaged, as a scientist, she still had this capacity to observe. And she said that when she didn't have language and she was frustrated or angry, she would notice that anger, frustration welled up and it arose and in about 90 seconds had pretty much passed away. And she said she just watched that happen over and over and over again. And she said when she started to get language back, when that part of her brain started working, she realized that she wanted to hang on to the anger. That when she was frustrated, she didn't want to let that frustration go. And that was really an insight for her. And her book is called My Stroke of Insight. And that was the most insightful thing that she learned, that she didn't have to hang on to anger and frustration, that it naturally arises and passes away. But she didn't want to let go of it when she had language. And there's a lot of suffering in that. She noticed that too, a lot of suffering in that. So we also suffer from the fear and anger and ill will of others. And others act out. So when we ask to be free from, our aspiration is to be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, and ill will. It's our own acting out and the acting out for other people who act out and harm us. So this actually is an aspiration for liberation for all beings. May we all be free from greed, from anger, from fear. The next aspiration, may we find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. And this may be the most complicated of the aspirations. When we talk about forgiveness, especially in looking at some of the early Buddhist texts, it seems that to forgive someone is a matter of bearing no ill will, not wanting someone to suffer for the sake of suffering. It's a kind of low bar for forgiveness. It doesn't require reconciliation. It's the idea is that you have forgiven someone if you bear them no ill will. So you're not seeking revenge, which doesn't mean that you're not seeking justice, but it's not revenge. It and the idea for forgiveness is essentially that it puts your own heart at ease. One time, a Dharma teacher, when I was really in a snit about something, said to me, "Does blaming ever lead to anything but more suffering?" And that's something I've really worked with over the years. Does blaming lead to anything but more suffering? And in my experience, even though there's that little sort of frisson of righteousness, that ultimately blaming just leads to more suffering. And I also think it's um, useful in forgiveness to think about, forgiving ourselves, um, forgiving ourselves or forgiving others, of not holding resentment, not wanting to punish. Uh, and Larry Yang, and this is a difficult thing um, for um, for many people. This idea of letting go of resentment, letting go of blame, letting go of the wanting someone else to be punished. Um, and Larry Yang, who uh, teaches out in the East Bay, has a wonderful meditation that goes something like this. And if I can't forgive myself or forgive someone else, may I have the aspiration to do so in the future. So you're not forcing yourself to um, to say that you're letting go of blame and resentment if that's still there. But may I have the aspiration to do so in the future? May I have the aspiration to have a more peaceful heart? And in some cases, especially in the case of trauma or severe abuse, um, it may not be skillful at all to talk about um, forgiveness. That may be the instance where self compassion is what is entirely called for and may be called for just years and years and years. Um, so that's something to consider that, you know, can the heart let go of uh, the desire to blame, to punish, to seek revenge? Um, can we let go of wanting to punish ourselves, to blame ourselves, to be harsh with ourselves? And this is where I think self compassion is just an essential practice. It is the go to practice for so many things. Um, so, what about the inevitable harms we bring to one another? I was thinking that one of the inevitable harms I find myself committing over and over again is not being consistently mindful of people's pronouns, of forgetting to ask, making assumptions about what someone's pronouns are. Um, and even sometimes when I'm told what someone's pronouns are, I I forget them. I mess up. It's not something intentional, but it's something I've done often enough, and I know that that hurts. Um, and for many of us who have been working with understanding more about the white, excuse me, the white racial frame, understanding about privilege, we may see more and more where we inevitably um, harm another without intention. Um, Opportunity hoarding is another example, often unintentional, that um, help people who are in your own circle and give them opportunities and benefit them, and your intentions are really good, but by benefiting them, other persons are excluded. This happens a lot in internships, in organizations that people's friends or their kids or friends uh, get these wonderful opportunities, and other people who might benefit, really, really benefit from them, may be excluded because the circle from which um, those opportunities are distributed remains very small. So that's opportunity hoarding. Um, and I offer this meditation practice regularly, or it was regularly before we were all staying at home, at the correctional facility, where I uh, co-facilitate with some other folks from Common Ground meditation. And this really means to people who have much to be remorseful for. This is a very potent aspiration, and sometimes it involves forgiving oneself for um, for the very bad decisions, for the causes and conditions that gave rise to why the person was there. But people also have a desire to be forgiven by other people, to be cared for and accepted back um, into society, into their families sometimes. Um, so the fourth in this little metta litany is, may I cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. And these, of course, are the Brahma Viharas, the divine states, the heavenly abodes. And the idea about the Brahma Viharas that I find so appealing is that they are always available to us, one or more of these states. And the baseline for them is, of course, loving kindness. This foundation, this wish that things are well with all beings, this idea of flourishing, of wanting flourishing, the idea of benevolence, that your attitude is just a generally benevolent attitude, wishing well for all beings. And this can become a default state. You can, as you, I was going to say, as you walk down the street, it used to be that you could, as you went down the street, as you saw people, maybe asking for money or something, you could just in your heart say, may you be well, may you be safe today. And we can still do this in our seclusion right now, for those of us who are secluded. But just having this as a kind of baseline state, this capacity to care about the well-being of others, and to let that be our default. And the second of these, compassion, karuna, it's the recognition of suffering in another or ourselves, with the aspiration for relief of the suffering. And compassion is taught as a very positive state, because it really is recognizing the pain of another, but it also includes the wish for its relief, the alleviation from pain. So it's a state that is suffused with the desire for another person's well-being, for relief from their pain. And sometimes presence, deep listening, can be the most compassionate act, to really be available. I think it's, um, is it Sharon Salzberg who says, attention is the doorway to compassion? But this idea of really being with another being, or being with ourselves when we are in difficulty, when there is distress, when there's hurt, of acknowledging that difficulty and recognizing how human that is, and then having metta for ourselves, having kindness for ourselves. So compassion is not just empathy, where we just take on the suffering of another or feel the suffering of another, but when we're with another, recognizing that another is suffering, of also having that deep wish that the suffering will be relieved, that the suffering will pass. And this, of course, is our practice uh, in mindfulness and Buddhism, that we are wishing well for the liberation of others. And someone has noted here, Jennifer has noted, that it doesn't always demand heroic acts or great words. In the time of darkest distress, what is most deeply needed is the fearless presence of a person who can be wholeheartedly receptive. And I think that's true. I'm going to turn this light off over here because I think it's getting very dark. Okay. Getting washed out. So thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, I think that it is that it is being completely present. And Jennifer is very modest and says, not my words, but in your Kamala, talk about Kamala as altruistic. It is happiness, the genuine happiness take in the happiness of another. We can really be happy when someone else is happy. And I think we see this most clearly when we watch the videos of animals playing, or sort of little pandas, and how they play with each other, how puppies, children, that we often just can be so infected by the happiness and the joy of others. So this is a wonderful capacity to cultivate, to be happy, to really have happiness in the happiness of another. And the Dalai Lama talks about this and says, this really increases, if we are happy in the happiness of others, it just increases our chances of being happy by 8 billion. So and I think it's something that in the tradition that I came from originally, this was not a virtue, being happy in the happiness of others. So I think this is something that is really worth cultivating. And finally, equanimity, upekkha. This is probably the most challenging of the heavenly abodes to cultivate and to strengthen. It is this balanced, steady, spacious mind. It's the mind that is not overwhelmed, the mind that doesn't fall into extremes. Sometimes it's described as impartiality, a very impartial mind. And the Dharma teacher Zohar Lavi talks about it as being equally tender toward all. So it's an impartiality of your care, of your tenderness. And equanimity also takes the big picture. It's always aware of impermanence. So it's and when we're overwhelmed, when we can't be equanimous, the right response is to be compassionate toward ourselves, to realize the suffering, that when we are just so overwhelmed that we have no steadiness, it's not a moral failure. It's just a state of mind that needs a different response. And that response can be compassion, self-compassion. So, but these are all states of mind that are available to us all the time. So if you're having a very hard time, if things are very bleak, you can just bring your mind to self-compassion. That's sort of wishing well for yourself, realizing the difficulty, being present with yourself, realizing the difficulty of the situation, recognizing how human that is to suffer in that kind of way, and to really hold yourself, to be present with yourself. So these are wonderful aspirations to wish for our families, our friends, for everyone else. And the final one is, may we live in peace and harmony with all beings. And this means that we're able to abide with how things are. This is how things are right now. And we respond to those circumstances in a non-harming way. May we live in peace and harmony. Can we be with things as they are, have a peaceful mind, have a mind that is able to take in how things are right now and respond without harming. And I think this goes back to the original fact about caring, that we are a caring species, and we're not the only caring species. That many of the mammals have very intricate caring social groups. Many animals deeply care about each other, for and about each other. But can we care? Can we care and not harm? And we can even think about this with respect to the environment, about living without harm to the planet. So being careful. I think living in peace and harmony means being careful. And careful has two senses, of course. It is full of caring, metta, our compassion, and it's also careful in the sense of being skillful in not harming ourselves and others. So this is a really great aspiration. And when we are in these states and we experience profound metta or compassion or appreciative joy, equanimity, these are really tastes of liberation, tastes of nirvana. These are tastes of freedom. So it's really wonderful to encourage this in ourselves, and often also to have this as our aspiration for others, that others are able to dwell in these beautiful states of mind. So that's what I thought I would offer this evening, and I would be delighted if there were some discussion or response, questions. I know that at the end of last week, Mark gave people a sort of meta homework about asking people to think about how do I find my way back to a basic friendliness, and why am I not doing this all the time? And I don't know if people you're reflecting on that throughout the week. But that would also be something that would be interesting to pursue. So Anne remarks, when people are truly compassionate with me, it takes my breath away. When people treat me with compassion, they make me feel worth caring about, which vibrates through my body and challenges certain underlying beliefs and conditioning to melt. Thanks, Anne. You can reflect on times when people have been really compassionate. And sometimes, it doesn't take much. When you are experiencing the care, the kindness of others, I'm always moved by healthcare providers who may see you or see me very briefly, but I have such a sense when I'm with them that they really care about my welfare. I just have a sense that it matters. And I think that that's one of the gifts we can give each other, is to let people know that they matter, that their welfare matters. And that's why I think this idea of friendliness, the friendliness of metta, is a really important idea, that we could have a practice of being, how to be friendly. It's a little more challenging now that many of us are not interacting with people as much in person, but friendliness is a wonderful practice. And Jennifer wrote, I love friendliness. It feels more approachable to me. So that's a lot of our practice is finding out what actually um, works for us. They um, they always say, the best exercise is the exercise you'll do. The best diet is the one you'll stick to. So, when we think about practices, what are the practices that are suitable with our own temperament? And you may find among the Brahma Viharas that there's one that is particularly suitable for you to practice and encourage. So we could return to our metta practice right now for about 5 minutes, and just go through our aspirations, perhaps with a deeper understanding. So let's just sit together, may I be well, safe, and peaceful. May I be free from the suffering caused by fear, anger, and ill will. May I find forgiveness for the inevitable harm we bring to one another. May I cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May I live in peace and harmony with all beings. And may we all of us in the Common Ground community, all of us all over the earth, in this time of uncertainty, may we all be truly well, safe, and peaceful. May we all be free from the suffering caused by fear, by anger, by ill will. May we all find forgiveness for the inevitable harms we bring to one another. May we all cultivate loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. May we all live in peace and harmony with all beings. So thank you, dear friends, for your sincere practice, and check into the calendar on Common Ground. There is lots of things happening. On Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, I'll be starting a series on working with the paramis, the virtues, and it will be 6 to 7 very short sit at the beginning and discussion about how we might put the paramis into practice. And the first one is generosity, and we'll start with that. Feel free to drop in, and it'll be a Zoom group, and it should be an interesting discussion. And I know lots of people are zoomed out, so this will be less than an hour, but just a chance to see if there's a way that we can work with the paramis in a kind of practical way in our lives, however they are now. So I hope everyone is well and safe, and I really appreciate your putting up with my technical challenges this evening in getting online. So thank you all, and I'll leave the chat line up for a minute or two.